Hey guys, Keith Hernandez here, Hernandez Sculpture Effects. Welcome back to another video. We're going to go through the process of casting a cowl. I'll talk about my steps, my materials, everything in between, and hopefully give you a guiding point to start if you choose to cast something of your own. Everything is broken down in the steps. We'll talk about filling ears, backfilling with foam, power meshing the corners of the mouth, and adding mesh eyes, and even going over the trimming. So it's a pretty comprehensive tutorial, and I think I cover pretty much everything that you need to know. And hopefully at the end of all this, you've got a good foundation to make something yourself. So let's get right into it and start this process. All right, for materials, you're gonna need gloves. I use nitrile gloves. Stir stick. These stir sticks that I buy are really nice. They are, I believe, Henry's wooden paint sticks. They are a smooth finish. They don't have any splintering issues. I've bought cheap ones where they'll splinter and get into the mix. I've bought cheap ones that will break while you're stirring. So try to invest in something good. This is a skewer stick. This is going to be used for the tips of the ears, mixing a small batch that we'll use to fill the ears. This is power mesh. Power mesh is a very important part. It's embedded into the cheeks of the mouth to give it strength. And then we will be adding white mesh eyes. And so this is the fabric loop of Velcro, and it goes in the cowl when it's at a tacky stage. We have a cup of baby powder and a brush, that's for the ears. Kick it. If you try to make a cowl without kick it, you will find that it takes forever for you to move on to each step. So get yourself some kick it. Cups. That's my black. And then of course off camera is the VitaFlex 40 and a digital scale for all your measuring. You can do VitaFlex 40 by volume. I prefer weight. It just, for me, I don't have the cups that have any kind of volume measurements. Those cups cost much more than these cheap popcorn cups. So we've got the layout of all the materials. If I forgot anything, I will bring it up as we are going through the actual cast, but let's get into that. All right, everything we're gonna do is gonna be on camera. We'll probably have some cuts to different parts so we're not wading through some of the boring aspects, because we will have to do some things and then wait while we let the urethane kind of kick a little bit. When I start making a cowl, the first thing that I do is I just pre-measure out my A and B. One of the lovely things about VitaFlex 40 is it's a 1-to-1, which makes it almost error-proof. You can do it 1-to-1 volume or weight. I do weight because I don't have the kind of cups that you would use for volume, and that's because those cups cost more. This is a 24-inch. So the kind of rule of thumb that I use for 24 inches is I start at 480 grams, and based on how the casts come out, I will adjust. I know that this is 480, and that is going to be a good point. We will be using 30 grams of A and B to pre-fill the ears to help with eliminating any issues with air bubbles. And we'll talk about how that goes. I do the pre-measurements because for me in my workflow, that has become more efficient for me. One of the things to take away with is that it's not unusual to adjust and tweak your process over the years. 20 years ago when I was making cowls, I did not make them this way. So the process has evolved. And right now, this is where I'm at. So if you're new to this or you're just curious, this is a good starting point. I will be transparent. One of the other things that I do when I make cowls is I wear a respirator. Obviously for this video, wearing a respirator would be problematic, so I'm not, but whenever I'm making a cowl, I'm wearing a respirator. It is recommended by the material data sheet to wear one, and so I would tell you wear one. So keep that in mind. So the good thing about pre-pouring everything is that now I'm done with these buckets. I don't need these on the workbench anymore, and can free up some space. This is some black pigment for urethane. I buy it in bulk. I get it from a place called Silpack. It's more price to volume ratio is so much better. You get it in a big old kind of like a pint cup, or so you have to find something. I've been using this thing for years. It's got all kinds of urethane nubs and stuff on it, but if you're making a lot, it's the way to go. Otherwise, Smooth On makes it. I put basically 1 drop for every 10, or yeah. So if this is a 480 gram, that means I'm going to put 48 drops. I don't know where I got that idea from, but it has been a good foundation for coloring. I really don't know what number I'm at, so I'm just kind of guessing. Talking and counting doesn't work. Pre-mix that, get it nice and even. And the reason why I've developed this way of pigmenting is because if I'm doing, let's say I have a cowl that needs to be like a certain blue. If I did every batch individually and then tried to guess all of my colorant, I might get a variation between layers. If I'm doing, say, a custom color, I can put it all in, pre-mix it all, and now I know that every batch is the same. Or let's say they have a cowl that they want, and then you want to make yourself some gauntlets that match that cowl. I would make them together and make one big batch of B, and then pre-mix the color, and that way they're all the same. But that is my technique for all coloring options. So like I said, we are doing a cowl that has, I haven't said this, I guess. We are doing a cowl that has medium length ears. And one of the things that are always a challenge with anything with tall ears is air entrapment. And to be honest with you, there isn't a foolproof guarantee method that's going to get you straight through without any issue. You're going to make a cowl, it's going to have ear problems. It just happens. But to prevent it, I've got a couple of techniques. First, I take a brush with a tip and I dab it with some baby powder and I stick it down into the mold and I move it around to kind of get it coated down to the tip. And this, again, helps with that surface tension that you get when urethane touches the silicone. There's air entrapment because of the viscosities in the urethane. And so this helps kind of wick it towards the surface. And give it a little dab, so it doesn't have any buildup in the tips. Use a little clamp here to keep it staying upright. Then I will pre-fill the ears with urethane and then let it kick off. That way I'm not tipping the molds up and down and the urethane comes out and goes back down and back and forth, because that can also create entrapment of air. So for this batch, 480 is what we started with. I'm going to do 30 of A and 30 of B to create a batch that will pre-fill these ears. So this batch will also need to be kicked because we don't want to sit here forever. Urethane, this particular urethane, I believe has a normal working time of like 40 minutes or something. So if you don't kick this, you're going to be sitting around for a little bit. When you kick it, it reduces that time to about 7 minutes, which is great and practical. So 30 of A, 30 of B, and we're going to do 1 gram of our Kick It. This stuff is like liquid gold, so you don't want to use too much. This one bottle is $40. So use it correctly. There's no such thing as putting too much in here to make it go faster. There's a certain limit, and that's going to give you a certain time, and you can't make it faster by putting more in there. Because this is a small batch, we want to make sure that we are really mixing this good. If you don't mix this good enough, you could have some uncurable urethane in the tips of the ears. So 30-second rule is a good one. I like to scrape off the stick, scrape the sides, scrape the bottom really well, go circular one way, circular the other way, just to really get this thoroughly mixed. Very important. All right, got a good mixture. We're going to get that down in there and pre-fill. We don't need to try to not go to the tippity top, because when you start moving the cowl around to get to the other side, it'll just spill out. So I'm not going all the way to the top. I'll try to get a video angle of it in 2 seconds here. Get that out. And as you can see, hopefully, you can see that I didn't go all the way down into or I didn't come all the way up on the ears. And then we'll just take the stick and just bring it down, press it gently, move it back and forth. I try not to scrape the sides. There we go. Get the stick out, and we'll let that set. All right, so it's pretty much set in there, kicked off to where if I hold up the cowl, the urethane isn't coming out of the ears, which is good because we don't want that. And now we're ready to start actually casting. I do batches of 3, so I basically do 3 rounds. And the reason why I've come to that number is because it has given me the thickness that I like, that maintains the shape when displaying, but has the flexibility to be able to move around, not turn your head or anything crazy like that, but flexible. You know, it's a mask. You want the mask to be able to go on relatively easy, and if it's too thick, the urethane won't stretch anymore like it should. So 3 batch is what I have come down to. Now, that means that bigger cowls, you have to adjust for it, and you have to adapt to those cowls based on the size to get the right formula down. And that takes a few casts sometimes. For beginners, you know, with the experience that I have, I can pretty much gauge how much to use after one cast. But I'm going to do batch 1 and 2 at the same time. I'm going to pre-pour it, pre-mix it, and then cast one, then cast the other. I do this because one is kind of like the fresh batch. It's going to be really fluid. I'm going to be able to work it into the mold with my hands easily, while the other batch is starting to slowly kick, but still kicking off quickly. Remember, it's about a 7-minute working time. And by the time I'm done with the first batch, I'm now putting in a thicker batch that will help create that thicker coat. So let's do that. We have our trusty scale. We used 30 already out of our 480, so now we're down to 450. That means batch 3 of 150A and 150B. So we'll do the A component first. 150. And the other one. And because it's just 3 batches, the leftover is left in the original cup and set aside. And now we're going to bring this to 300 because 150 times 2. And if you're over 1 or 2 grams, it's okay. You don't have to try to fish out the material. There is a little bit of a tolerance for these mixes. But if you get really crazy over it, you're going to have to compensate. And then we go to this one. 150 into the cup, giving us 300. All right, now I'm gonna set this cup to just drain into that. It's gonna be fine. There isn't a immediate reaction until you start mixing it. So in case you're worried, usually though, you don't want to pre-pour and then add Kick It to it. Kick It will start to do something just from contact. It's some crazy stuff. But we're going to go ahead and put 4 grams of Kick It in each one of these. So this I try to be very careful with because I don't like to waste this stuff. Like I said, this stuff's $40 a bottle. And that we want to go as long as possible. All right. Set this aside, and then we're going to go, like I said, we're going to go ahead and pre-mix both batches here to get them firing off. This first batch that I'm mixing will be the second batch that I pour, giving it the most time to kind of kick and react. Make sure you're scraping your bottoms really well, your sides. You want a good mix. Take your stick, dump it, mix it. 30 seconds is a good number to be mixing. This stuff doesn't fire off that quickly, so you don't have to be too worried. It is temperature sensitive, so if you are doing this like in a garage in a hot summer's day, this will probably go off much quicker. I'm in a, temperature controlled environment, so it's always consistent. Usually, sometimes it can be a little warmer in here in the winter with the heater running. All right, so this first batch is ready to be poured. I double glove so that I don't have to take off the main glove, and this allows me to move quickly between the batches. And I only do the right hand because I'm right-handed. So we're gonna get that in there, and I pour on the front facing of the cowl, and I dump the whole thing, and I do just the half, the front half. Get that dumped in there, trying to get it to flow across the face. When making a cowl, generally the face is the area that needs the most attention because it has all the detail. It has, much more change in surface than like the back of the head where it's just kind of rounded and flat. So you have to give a little bit more attention to it. Otherwise you'll have thin spots in like the brow or the nose. So kind of just getting it to flow into the nose, face, and chin, rotating that into the area. And then I will lean it to get it to go to the back. And this is where we'll get our hands dirty and scoop and rub around. This is to break the basic surface contact with the urethane so that it does not trap air bubbles. Air bubbles happen because the urethane, which has been kicked, is very thick in its viscosity. As it gets thicker, it wants to hold air against the surface. So we have to just really make sure we kind of get every inch with our hands. And this is a messy spot. So definitely want to make sure that we're getting around the eyes. So I'm feeling around the eyes, in the nose, around the edge of the cutout for the mouth, the brow area, above the eyes, and just getting it really good coating. I'm getting around the edges where the urethane that I pre-poured is. Make sure that it doesn't trap any air along those edges. And I like to go past the edge to give it a chance for it to flow back and to kind of help thicken up that seam or that edge cut. Now that we've got that coated, this is why I double glove. I can just get rid of this glove really quick. Go to my next one. Notice that I put on the new glove when I'm ready to pour. I don't want to mix anything with the second glove on my hand because I don't want to contaminate this glove. This glove is touching the urethane, and if I pre-mixed everything with the glove on and then put my hand in there, I could have unmixed material on my hand. Now we're going to pour on the back side, and you can see it's already quite thicker, and that's what we want because that's going to give it a nicer coating, because this time we are not going to run our hand into this mold. We're pretty much done with that stage. That's really only on the first batch. We might stick our hands in there on the last stage, or if there's a pooling of urethane and we need to move it. For beginners, you should be trying to do one cowl at a time. Whenever I'm making a cowl, I'm always doing a second one because there's downtime between this batch and the final batch. I put a lot more emphasis and focus on the front because, again, that area has a lot of valleys and changes and such, and you don't want any thin spots happening up in those areas. So we work those areas extra. And it's basically letting the urethane drain and rotating, drain and rotating. This is where you can end up with pooling, and you don't want anything to pool in one particular area because then it'll be really, really thick. The most common mistake that I think beginners would have is urethane pooling on the top of the head, because you leave this upright and you prepare for the next thing and you forget it, and then this big old glob of urethane. I mean, you can already see it here in the camera. There's a lot of urethane down in there. So we want to constantly be rotating and moving this around so that it isn't in one spot for too long. And in some cases you might have to scoop it around just to help it along because it starts to get slower and slower. And you might be wondering, well, why don't you just pour out the extra? The formula that I've established for this cowl uses those grams, all 480 of them. And if you end up with a huge pool on the table, that means you've lost a lot of urethane, and that's going to affect the thickness somewhere in this cowl. So you have to be working it. You have to let it move through the mold in areas. And it's okay if some does drip out, and you will see some drip out when I leave it upright. But a huge amount, that's going to be a problem. Now, if you are finding that this is too much, then you'll need to adjust the formula on the next one, because there could be a case where you thought what you used was the right amount, but it's too much. It happens. And then in the future, you'll have to adjust accordingly. We're getting a really good coating in there. I know it's a little bit dark, but one of the things that you get through experience over time is kind of a feel for the inside and the thicknesses, and you kind of get a good sense of how thick a cowl is. That just comes from experience. But sometimes you have to move the urethane because it's getting to that slower state. When I move urethane, I always move it from the back of the head out, never from the front. The front is always the area that needs the most urethane because it's got, again, I keep emphasizing all the detail, the nose, the brow, and all those are areas that the urethane wants to work away from. Whereas the back of the head, it's just flat and round. And so I pull from there and scoop it. Now I'm going to do that and show you how to do that. But one of the risks with scooping is that you could graze the edge of the mold and thin that area out. So you have to scoop with a gentle pull. So I'm not trying to touch the back of the head. And then I just bring up, and I usually just bring it to areas that look like they could use some, which is usually the edges where you would cut. You could end up with some thin spots. So I try to focus in on that. And one of the things that usually happens if you're doing this is that the back of the head will be thicker. That's just because there's no resistance for anything. So I try to gauge that thickness and move that away from it. So it is setting. You can see on the camera how it's moving extremely slow. It's not really coming off, and that's good. So we're at a stage now where I can turn the mold right side up and kind of let it sit. This particular mold doesn't have a flat surface, so it might lean to one side or the other, and that's okay. It does bother me because I like it to drain evenly, so I will add a little clip to it and set it and forget it. But what we're doing at this stage may be preparing for the next mask. If you hadn't done any pre-cutting of your power mesh, you might have done that right now. But we're not gonna forget this cowl for too long. We don't want to leave this too long like this, because what will happen is inside the mold you'll get like streaking of urethane, like basically like stringing, but it's ribbed inside the cowl, and I don't like that. I like my cowls to be nice and smooth. If it happens, it happens. Trying to avoid it is one thing. So that means we have to kind of set it upside down for a little bit, right side up for a little bit, and kind of go back and forth. But you can see we are losing urethane, but it's not much, and those are the concentrated areas. You can also see what I was talking about. Those are those kind of like ribbing that I don't want. So when I turn this right side up now, those are going to start to go back away. So it's kind of like a juggling act, and some cowls are going to react differently, and you're going to learn through casting what needs to be done to get just the right pooling in the right areas, because sometimes it'll pool in the bridge of the nose and you'll have a really thick nose. Sometimes it'll be too much. You'll have a lot of urethane. I mean, this is really going good. You can see all of those ribbings are now gone. The angle in which the mold is resting is important. Sometimes I'll rest it like this, sort of at a kind of a slight 45 to drain out of the nose. Sometimes you might have really sharp lines in the eyes and sharp corners. Urethane pulls away from them, and so you might have to leave it like this for a minute or two just to have the urethane kind of pull to those sharp corners. Just you have to kind of play with the mold as you go. Again, everything is learning. Even for somebody with the experience that I have, a new mold requires me to evaluate how that cowl is going to perform when you cast it. So there isn't a full method every single time. So a little air bubble there, we'll just pop it with our thumb, because air will get entrapped still. I think when casting a cowl, the worst thing that happens is you get an air bubble in the most awful place, and there's not much you could have done to prevent it. Learning how to fix those things after the cast becomes an important skill to learn as well. But this thing is getting to a point where the urethane is going to be tacky, and that's the stage that we're waiting for. That will be ready for the power mesh. So if you look here on this guy, what I'm looking for right now is when I touch the urethane, I'm looking for it to not come off so much onto my thumb. So you can see here. But it is at a point there when I do get it, it's not moving a lot. But if I put the power mesh in, let's say right now at this stage, because it's not to a full kind of tack situation, it will slowly slide away from where I've put it. And that would be, it just void the whole purpose of that. So we're just doing a back and forth. If you try to do two cowls at once, you know, you're over here, you're making that cowl. Don't forget that this guy is at this stage, because you have to flip it and rotate it so that you're not getting any bad pooling or bad streaking. Be aware of your cast. At this stage, I am going to start prepping this area. We don't need this anymore. This can go here. This guy, I'm going to go ahead and put in my 4 grams, but I'm not going to mix it yet. I know I'm going to use this really soon, so it's okay to put this in now, because I'm really just waiting for that urethane to be ready for the power mesh, which might be a little tricky to show y'all. It's really dark. I'm going to have to set up another light for future videos so you get into these angles, but you can see that I can't really move the urethane, but it is coming off on my fingers still. That's good stage though. I can tell that this isn't going to, see how it's holding its shape when I touch it? That means I can put the power mesh in. So the power mesh goes in the corners of the mouth, and if you don't have them, there is a higher risk of it being ripped if someone pulls up like this, which you're not supposed to do anyways when you take a cowl off. Good lighting is important for this. You won't be able to see this, but I'm looking for the actual, you should be able to see the ridges of the outline of the mouth. Stick that in there to go a little bit on one end, a little bit on the other, and tap it down. And then we'll do the same over here. Sorry, you can't really see this. I can't really see this. Usually I have a light that I'll just position. But if you're in a well-lit area and you should have a well-lit workspace, you should be able to see these things. Beautifully done. And I don't have to wait for the next step. I can go right into it. So we're mixing up our last batch. This cowl, just by looking at it, I can tell it's pretty really good coating. So I'm not going to run anything on this side or the front. I'm just going to dump it all down in the middle. And typically this last step, it varies on the cowl itself, and from your first cast you kind of get an idea of like, oh, I don't want too much here, it's got enough here. So I know that the back of the cowl is good, the whole bottom edge of the cowl is good, so I'm just focusing it in on the head, top of the head, and then I will focus this all on the front and get into those power mesh to get it embedded and covered, and then really just work it in the front area. And I am going to get my hand dirty just to feel the nose. I want to make sure that the bridge of the nose is not too thin. And that's again through experience and feeling the urethane. You can get a gauge. But before I do that, I'm going to make sure that my hand is coated, because this area is all sticky now. It's tack. And if I don't have coated, it'll stick to my hand. You can see that. But if I have coated with urethane, it won't do that. So I'm feeling, yeah, it's got a good coating in the side of the nose. The brows feel pretty good. The brow is always the tricky part. But yeah, this is good. So I'm just going to use my hand to kind of coat everything manually to kind of get a good sense of everything. I can tell that the back of the head is pretty thick. Not like too thick, but it's got a good thickness on it. So I'm at a stage where this I don't need to worry. I'm going to leave it right side up and let it drain. And while that's doing that, kind of prep for the final step. I don't need this anymore. The final step is going to be the Velcro embedded into the cowl. And then we'll have one more step after that. All right, like before, we are waiting for the urethane to get to a similar tack where you touch it and a little comes off, but it's still very sticky. Now we can embed our soft fabric Velcro. This is the loop side. Basically, I cut it in square, about 3 fingers wide, and I fold it in half and I lay it across the center of the eye and then kind of, rub it down to make sure it gets good contact. So getting this in there is kind of a one and done. So you don't want to miss the mark. If you miss the mark, it's going to be hard to get off without damaging the sensitive urethane, because the urethane's not cured. So it can tear if it pulls too much. So I'm doing the best to get this on camera without sacrificing the cowl. Lighting is a little challenging when you're casting in black. Get it in there and just rub corner to corner, edge to edge to make sure it is fully seated. It is possible to put this down and then trap air under it and then not have full contact. So you need to make sure that you're gently rubbing it. If you're having trouble with your gloves sticking at this point to the urethane for whatever reason, you can always spritz a little water on your glove and then the urethane won't stick at all. So there's one fully seated in the mold. Hopefully you can see it. Get that on camera. Yeah. And do the same for the next one. Fold it in half. Find that sweet spot. I'm going to do this one off so I can make sure I get it seated correctly. And then fold it down. rub that down in there really nicely. Make it nice and seated. You definitely don't want this to be off-centered. It sucks if you do, because then you have to get either another piece in there to kind of compensate. Because if it's not going past the eye enough, the Velcro mesh won't have anything to bite onto once you cut the eye out. All right. So that consists of the last main step, but there is one more step after this. And I like to wait for the urethane to get just a little bit less tacky for that, to where if I touch it, nothing happens. Nothing comes off on my thumb. And we're pretty close to that stage. And that is, it's a really special step to me. In 2018, I came up with a method that at the time hadn't been done. It was something I invented or came up with. Now it's sort of a standard across the board, and it's really probably one of my most proudest accomplishments in the casting cowl world, and that is having a cowl easily slip on and off. Back in 2018, I was invited to go to New York Comic Con, and I wanted to don one of my sculptures, which I hadn't done it before. I've always sculpted for other people, but never for myself, and I knew that I didn't want to have the cowl pull on me. And it's something I'd been thinking about, but never came across a solution until then, and it was a pretty simple solution. I basically take a simple material, and this is baby powder, and I powder the inside of the mold, and then let it cure. And the answer to why a cowl sticks to your head is when you cast a cowl, it comes out super glossy. And that is the surface that pretty much pulls and tugs on anything, skin, hair, alike. And to combat that, we want a matte surface in there. And the solution that I came up with was powdering it. Because the powder mats the surface while it's at this stage, it will retain that. And that's what allows it to slip on and off. So any time you get a cowl from somebody that slips on and off, that I'm the reason why. And I take great pride in knowing that. But here's how I do it. I usually do this outside. I use baby powder, but more specifically and more importantly, cornstarch based baby powder. You do not want to use talcum powder for this because you don't want to breathe that in. Cornstarch is a natural substance, and it's in your food, it's in baby powder, and that is what I use. And then I thoroughly clean these out before I call them done. So it is a little bit of an extra step, but a necessary one, I think, in order to keep the cowl on and off easily. So just liberally put it along the outer edge. I like to get some on the inner of the neck because that is the most important contact space. And then with what's left over in there, I just sift it around to get it into all the nooks and crannies. Chin, back of the head, everything. Once it's all said and done, I like to give it some taps, kind of get it all focused in, and then I'll dump it in the trash. That gives you the nice matte surface. We'll let this fully cure, wash it out, dry it clean, and then move on to the next step, which is adding foam, expanding foam to the ears. So, all right, we're back, and we are going to perform the final step for how I make a cast, and that is to foam fill the ears. When you cast a cowl, even if you fill the ears with urethane, you can't quite fill all the way to the top without having to either hold the cowl like this, wait for the urethane to cure, and then do it on this side, because the surface of the head kind of, curves up and prevents that. So what I do is I backfill it with foam, and then I use some tape in my hand to kind of conform that to make it more rounded to match the head. And it's an important step, I think, for longer or taller ears, because without it, it's that empty void, and then they can start to bow out. So this helps kind of conform around the head and keep those pointed straight up. So off camera, I cleaned the inside of the cowl. I washed it out with water. I used a microfiber to kind of clean it down, and then I air dried the remaining moisture so that the tape that I use will stick. If you don't, it'll just peel off. So it's just regular packing tape, and I will use that here on the inside to get the shapes that I want. So, and for the foam that I use Flex Foam. It's 10. This foam is a little bit more firmer. The expansion isn't as much, so I don't have to worry about it getting really big, but I do have to use a little bit more than something that expands a lot. So it's kind of a trade-off. But again, and it's firmer to the touch. So it's technically a 105 by 100 weight. I cheat it, and I just do 1-to-1 usually. And for a cowl like this, I'm going to use 20 grams of A and 20 of B, giving me a total of 40. So I like to pour A first, and I just use a same cup and a small tongue depressor stick here. Usually I do 2 at a time. That's about how many you can get away with before the foam expands too much. But doing 1 is perfect, because then you have plenty of time to work the foam. Get this next batch in. And then this is a white base, so you have to use a little bit extra pigment to get a nice black. Otherwise it'll come out really gray. It doesn't really matter, but I like it to be as dark as I can. So I usually put 5 drops. And the working time is pretty quick. I'd say you have about 2-3 minutes. Full expansion within 6 minutes. But you don't need to be worrying. You don't want to rush yourself and then spill all this over. So don't feel like it's going to shoot off really quick. And I've got the camera adjusted, so you should be able to get a good view of it as I pour it. I do one side, fill it towards the top, and take my tape, because if I set this down, some of it might spill out. So I'll set the tape down in there, get a nice coverage, and then I'll go and pour the other side. There's a little water in there, but that's okay. I do try to get all that out as much as possible, but sometimes if you have the Velcro in there, it'll leak the moisture off of it. If that were a huge puddle, I'd probably be worried, but it'll be fine. This is not really for a major structural thing. It's not anything other than to fill a void. So if this was an outside cast, that water would be a problem because it would affect the surface, but it's inside the cowl. It's never going to be seen again. So at this point, it's a little bit of just waiting. We're waiting for it to expand. And when it gets to the tape, it starts to bulge out. We're going to want to press it down with the back of our hand, kind of curved, to kind of help create that concave curve. And that is a kind of, you have to use it quite a bit, get some experience with it to kind of get familiar with it, because if you wait too long, it won't compress. And if you go too early, it can get kind of messy. Sometimes it'll leak out, and it's really sticky at this stage. So we want to get it just the right point. You can see it starting to rise and bubble up into a nice mushroom. If you do get it at the wrong time and you've got this big bulge, throw the cowl away. It's over. No, I'm just kidding. It's not the end of the world. You just have to go in there and cut it away to get rid of that bump. You don't want it to be bumping out like that, because then it'll mess how the cowl wears. But it's not the end of the world. You don't need to worry about thinking you've ruined the entire cast. Sometimes you don't put enough in there and it doesn't get too much of a bulge to where you can press it down. That's also okay. We're really trying to fill the bulk of the void that's down in there. So if it doesn't come all the way out to where you can press it, it's okay. You haven't done anything wrong. You don't need to go back and add more. This is going to fill up pretty nicely. There might be a little bit of a empty space there, but there might be also enough that when we press it, it will fill that. Yeah, it's looking really good. It is a messy process. Sometimes you tape is off a little bit. Sometimes it does expand more than expected, and then it goes past the tape. You just have to really gauge that and adjust for that as that happens. It's really foam is one of those things that we know the parameters. We know that it expands 6 times in this particular foam. We know how long it will take before it's fully expanded, but it's a chemical. Temperature variances, the amount that you mixed, how much you stirred it, all that can affect it, and it can do something different almost every time. So again, when you've done it enough times, you've got all those situations, you've faced them, you'll be better at it. But let's see if we can get this in here. This one's looking pretty good. I'm going to try to press it in. And I'm just pressing it with the back of my hand to kind of help create that surface. This is casting really well, so I know I'm going to get a really good outcome in there. So I know it's a little hard to see because it's all dark down in here, but hopefully you get kind of the idea. You can see like on the outer edge there, down at the towards the top of the screen, there is an area that's not fully filled, but again, that's not a big problem. That's going to be okay. You might have to do that a couple extra times, and then you let it fully cure. I would wait till it's fully cured before trying to remove the tape, because the tape and the foam, they're both pretty sticky, and they can have a fighting chance to rip each other apart. Usually more of the foam than the tape. Sometimes the tape does leave a little bit of the sticky residue over, and that'll go away over time. So it's just part of that process. But this is looking good, and I think that seals it for all the steps necessary to cast the cowl. We'll wait for the foam to fully cure, because pulling the cowl now, I mean, you could pull the cowl now, yes, but the foam is still curing, it's still expanding, and if you pull it too early, you'll get really weird defects where the foam might collapse and shrink in the urethane around the area. So we will wait until it has its full cure, and that's easy to tell just by touch. If it does not move, it's really firm, then we can pull it and then trim her up. So looking good, off to a great casting start. Let's let that sit and we'll pull her out. All right, our final step is to pull the cowl from the mold, and then we'll be trimming it. I use these, this is by Fiskars. I think they're like number 15 scissors or 13. I don't remember exactly, but you should be able to find them just by seeing them. They are really sharp, very reliable. I've had these for at least 10 plus years. Broke and it still works. I think they have a lifetime warranty. I should probably look into getting these fixed or replaced. But they are a good little scissors. Got a nice point. Get in those tight areas. I could not recommend a better scissor for any of the trimming. When we take the cowl out, we want to do some careful peeling. Sometimes the urethane bites to the shell, whether it's a printed shell or a fiberglass shell, and you just want to take your time breaking it free before just really trying to go in there and ripping it out. I look for an area that I can peel back easy, and then I just start to kind of work my fingers in there and just carefully peel it back. There's no worse feeling than ripping a cast at this stage because you weren't being careful. Definitely take your time. You should take your time on all these aspects that you've seen throughout this video, because rushing any of these steps can lead to a disaster. Okay. I like to put my hand down in the front, getting the nose out, the brow out. Those are all the areas that are going to bite down the hardest. The back of the head, there's nothing there, so it's not going to need a lot of extra force. And then we'll grab one side of the mask and just kind of pull to kind of loosen and pop the ears out. Get the other side. And then from there, we should be able to get the whole thing out. Don't be fooled by the table, it is clean. I just flipped the mat over. This is a perfectly clean side. But there it is. The cast came out beautifully. I don't see any defects or issues. The nose feels nice and thick. Really pleased with this. So we'll go into trimming. You will see there is a little air bubble in the mold, but sometimes the eyes will catch air when you make the silicone pour, but that is not an issue at all with this. That'll trim right off. I always start with the base, but you can start wherever you want, but for whatever reason, base is where I start. And I just go slow and steady, trying to control the cut. These scissors are sharp enough that I could slide it without even moving it, but you do that and you could go off the rails, and I've never had that happen, but I can assume that that's something that could happen, so I'm pointing it out. Getting it along the edges here. Probably my least favorite part of casting is trimming. It's just a necessary step, but it's really uneventful. It's not that very interesting. It is, I guess, rewarding when you're done and you have this cleaned out, finished cast, but that is open to debate. Then we go into the mouth. I start towards the corner, but not all the way in the corner. You might not hear it. Let me get it closer to my... Sometimes you can hear cutting the power mesh, which is good. That means it's in the right spot. And even though we put power mesh in there, I still make the effort to round the corner over here at the edge of the mouth. Cutting it at a sharp angle is what can cause it to be a problem. So I just try to cut it as much with roundness as I can instead of like 90-degree cuts from two different angles. So do the best you can. Come down here. When I sculpt my cowls, I try to make this edge as defined as possible, but depending on how it was printed and how it was cleaned up, sometimes that edge gets a little rounded from the primers and sanding and everything, but a nice crisp edge in these corners is easier to follow, but not impossible if it's not there. It's really not that big of a deal. Coming up to our next corner here. Get that rounded cut. Didn't go all the way in, so I'm coming back. You can see the strength from the power mesh as I'm pulling this to get that rounded corner. Now the eyes have the fabric backing on them, so we want to make sure that we are being a little bit careful because it's going to be a little bit more resistance when cutting this. So we got to poke in there, watching our fingers on the other side, and just take our time. Tip cutting is what I like to refer to it as. I'm just using the tips to cut. I have a scissor sharpener to sharpen these over time. They do get a little dull in the tips. I just sharpened these before this video, so they're cutting beautifully. And, you know, we're inverting this to help us see the lines. Here you'll see I trim away this air bubble that will appear on every cast. So I just basically cut around it. And that's it. That's all the trimming necessary. It's a little dirty because, you know, there's powder in here that needs to be cleaned. It will get a second cleaning before calling it finished, but for the most part, this cowl came out very beautifully. We'll add the mesh in here. Like you saw at the beginning of the video, we'll put it on my display bust and really let it shine. But that is the bulk of it. All right, one more step I forgot to show you before, and that's the mesh eyes. These are probably the crudest thing I make, but I do try my best to make these as nice as possible. They are sewn on using the power mesh in Velcro. I make really long strips, trim off what I need, and then stick them on there. One of the things I do make sure I do is I round the corners, because no one wants a sharp, pointy corner near their eyeball. So I take care of that for you. And look at that. 2, 3, 4. And just take it, place it towards the top, and then I like to pull it to stretch it. If there's a little Velcro showing, you just kind of push it back with your finger. You could come in there and trim that if it's big. Sometimes they're long because when you cut them, it just kind of do the different things. But grab it here, pull it in. Very nice. Grab our bust. Beautiful bust that I made, and it's using the same base that I sculpt my sculptures on. So when these masks go on them, they fit almost perfectly. As you can see, look at that, like a glove. All right, there he is. Take your beautiful wet microfiber cloth and give it a nice spruce, and you have a beautiful cowl sitting in your living room or bedroom, whatever works. I don't know. All right. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Start to finish, if you, during this process at all you have any questions about what you saw, what I did, maybe something that I did but you wish was explained a little bit more, let me know in the comments. I love helping people out. I was a teacher for 15 years. I taught art. This is one of my specialties, I suppose. Now that I just make my art, I try to show what I've done and show others how to do it, because you never know, you might find a new passion that you haven't discovered before. This is only the first of many tutorials. In the future, we'll go to the beginning and I will show you how a sculpture like this comes to life, and then how we make the mold, how we mold it, and be right back to the beginning. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you on the next one. Keith Hernandez, go out there and make something. You know what? I'm Batman. Yeah. I'm Batman.